Perfect. So I think we'll start off rather slowly today. It might be that some more people are coming. My name is Magnus. I come from Sweden. I am a member of the World Future Studies Federation. Our president, Mr. Eric, has actually been given a lecture at this conference, so I'm happy that you are here. I'm really happy that all of you are here today. This will be a workshop where I will do almost no talking and you will do almost all talking around the tables. And we will share some ideas, and I like to think of this kind of workshop as the starting point for more discussions. So if you leave this workshop with one new idea, or if you have talked to one people you didn't know before, that's a success for the workshop. So this is just the first step. This is what we will do today. I will make a very short introduction to some thoughts that I have about the topic of youth and the future. Then we have 3 questions that we will discuss and share some ideas. And after that, we will make a very short summary of what we have been talking about. I encourage you all to use papers, pencils, butcher paper to write bullet points and comments, post-its, etc., etc. But there is no strict format, so you can use it in the way that suits you. We have heard during the conference from many people about the future. You spoke about hope. There is a need for hope. That is something that I think connects to youth. We have heard other speakers talk about the light in the tunnel, which is also something that I find very interesting. And unfortunately, there are a couple of things that is happening at the same time when it comes to youth. Many youth in the Western world feel left out. They don't feel that they have an entrance to education. They don't have a job. And for many, this generation of youth is the first generation in the Western world that isn't better off than their parents. That is their feeling. Their feeling is exclusion and left out. So that is one part of youth and future. But the other part, I think, is some of the things that I want to talk about. There has never been so many young people in education today, ever. There will be a massive amount of young people going through higher education, masters and PhD, in the long run. So there will be more and more well-educated youth. The demography in itself also tells us that there will be more and more youth for at least 25 to 50 years ahead of us. And already today, more than half of the population in Africa is under the age of 25. And if you just think about that for a bit, that alone, the number of youth, is huge in comparison to elder people. And that is also true for part of Asia and part of Latin America. It is not true for the Western world if we talk about US and specifically Northern Europe. When we talk about the modern world, the global world, what is happening when it comes to globalization, That is another very important aspect, I think, when we talk about youth. Youth travel, they are connected to each other in a way that was not even thinkable when I was a kid. My sister has a kid that is 12 years old, and I spoke to her before this conference, and she told me that today they are doing group work like this workshop here. Her class in Sweden are doing that with the class in Malaysia. And for her, that is completely normal to speak to a 12-year-old girl in Malaysia doing group work together, which to me is something really important. Finally, I would just like to comment about what I call enthusiasm. It's a bad word, but it's a little bit better in Swedish, but it's not really a good word in English. But I think that when we see about youth movement, when we see, for one example, the election today in America, there has been a huge movement from young people who really want to be part of the change and be part of the political system. So I think there is something very interesting in terms of enthusiasm with young people. And there is also, let's call it, many new ways of young people to interact. It is very natural for a student today in Sweden to take one course or more courses in a school in Italy or a school in America. Young people travel much more, as we said, not only in terms of vacation, but actually for training, for courses, for voluntary work, etc., etc. And there is a whole masses of different ways to interact on a global scale with the use of new technology, social media, etc., etc. So for young people, there is definitely something that is different from when, even if I don't consider myself too old, when I was in school, it was completely unheard of to have these kinds of interactions. So this was just to give you some of my thoughts, maybe some ideas to what you might talk about around the tables. But now I would first of all invite you to just say hello to somebody at the table that you don't know yet. So just say hello and introduce yourself with your name and maybe where you are from. Very easy, 1-2 minutes. Just choose 1 or 2 people and say hello to them and tell them your name. Hello.
My name is Ammar. I'm from Syria, but I live here in Syria. I'm studying like engineering now. What is your name? Where are you from? You are from Sweden, right?
Yes.
I thought when I first saw you and your mate, I thought that you were from Spain.
No, from Sweden.
Sweden.
Yep.
Stockholm?
No, Malmö, south of Sweden, almost Copenhagen.
Yeah.
So are you at the university?
King Saud
Yeah.
University.
And
KSU, if you heard of it.
yeah, and you're doing engineering,
Yeah, civil.
civil engineering.
Yeah.
What field?
Still in the first year.
First year. Okay.
Still new. And what do you do? What about you?
I work as a civil servant for the government in Sweden
Yeah, good.
and doing future things.
Good, but I like Europe because they have a future vision about how the things will go, how the cities. In Sweden, I think you have like in the night, in the winter, you have like in the night when you go, you have like a very beautiful. I don't know how to call it in English. Beautiful colors in the sky, green and.
Yeah. That is in the northern part of
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
It's called in
the
English
Scandinavian Europe.
Northern Lights.
Yeah, Northern Lights, exactly. Absolutely good.
So
It's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to see it.
you should.
Yeah.
Now let's see if we can start it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now at least you have had you have had an opportunity to talk to one or two, maybe three persons around the table. So, what I would like us all to do now is to just think about the question about what are the characteristics of youth today in your context. So if you are at school, that is your context. If you are at work, that is your context. If you are in Saudi Arabia, of course, that is your context, etc., etc. So try to think about what is the characteristics of youth today from your perspective, from your individual perspective. So I just want us to start with thinking about this by ourselves. So start to think as an individual and make some notes on a piece of paper. You can use Post-it, you can use the paper and just write down what are you thinking about. When you hear the question, what are the characteristics of youth? Maybe 2, 3, 4 minutes by your own and just write it down. We'll see when they start sharing.
I'll see if I can
Yeah.
just shuffle.
So now when you have thought about it, maybe you have one or two words or one sentence on a piece of paper, talk to your neighbor about what are your personal reflections on what do we think about when we say youth. Just talk to your neighbor about it.
رسميا باليونسكو بكل مكان رسميا لا يقدر واحد يطلق عليك تسمية عجوز ديار شيخ قبل سنة واحدة 64 ما يسمح واصلا بالنسبة لي العمر مجرد يا والله احنا مجتمعاتنا سبحان الله صار عندنا واحد بس تجاوز 40 على الباب الخمسين صار الناس ما شاء الله على عمر 90 سنه وفيها تمشي لسه عندي اسنان حتى اسنان بريطانيا مثلا الافرج ايج افرج مش فوق متوسط العمر الناس بتعيش بالنسبه للبروفيسورات متوسط في ناس تعيش اكثر في واحد عم يشارك والله انا رايي عندهم شوي طيب عندهم كثير هم صغار بس بدون ما يصير هذا عندهم كمان موضوع بديهة السرعة صار عندهم كمان صار الجوالات التقنية بشكل عام كل شيء جزء من حياتنا أغلب وقت الصور كمان بينظر دائما أغلبهم معظم ينظرون لأشياء جديدة إذا جربوا أشياء جديدة ممكن يصنعوا عندهم الرغبة يصنعوا أشياء جديدة وعندهم دائما أفكار جديدة ممكن هاي الأشياء الأشياء السلبية موضوع التنظيم ايه التنظيم بشكل عام يفتح كثير ناس صراحة أنا مدني اي موضوع كمان انك بالذات لما بتيجي تحكي مع شاب دخلت فلاتة ركز كثير بينظر لك نظرة غريبة. لا ما بحب الشيء الواحد لازم يمشي بالشارع كلنا عندنا مبلغ صراحة مو المعظم مش فهمان شو هو العلم، فهمان انه منحصر بس بالمؤسسات هذا الشيء غلط واللي وانا بشوف حتى العلم الحقيقي انت تعرف المؤسسات وانا ما المعظم لا ما بشوفه ما كثير نعم صراحة يعني اصلا العالم راسمالي شيء طبيعي بس انه ما بدي يكون الشغل العلم كمان من التربية المجتمع اللي حوالينا زرعها فينا رب التعب مثلا هون المحاضرة هذه من السويد أكيد زرعنا الرب إنه نتعلم حتى إذا بسألوا in your intermediate school or in the high school, did you love? Actually, I want an honest and frank answer. Did you love in that time when you were in the high school to read, to learn new things, to try new things, not from regardless of the school when you are free outside the school, I mean. Did they plant that passion to learn or not? I want an honest answer.
Maybe not the school, but my parents and friends did. My family did, but
So
maybe not the school.
Your surrounding, your close surrounding was really like motivating you to learn.
Yes.
Thank you. Because we have here different cultures.
But that
here in the Arabian cultures, to be honest with you, I'm from Syria. Arab Republic of Syria. Yeah, that's the full name. So we don't here in our culture love like to read books, to teach. Not all of us, but most of us, to learn new things, to try new things. We just look at the knowledge, school, university, and then you work. Most of us, and that's really bad, in my opinion.
Interesting. Let's see if we can pick up on that.
مش المدرسة تحديدا صح انها مدرسة كويسة بس اصدقائه وعائلته هن يعني فعلا تحتاجون من جوا عشان يتعلموا يثقف عشان ليش مركز كثير على موضوع القراءة ما فيك يعني الابداع مرتبط بالقراءة مثلا لهالدرجة القراءة بالنسبة لي وانا اصلا قارئ سريع ما لي متعود بالاشياء احنا القراءة اللي العب نقراها بهذا النوع اغلب الناس حابين القراءة يتعلموا شو اسمه القراءة السريعة، شو يعني القراءة السريعة؟ تقرا 600 كلمة بالدقيقة بالأعيد يعني مش قراءة تقرأها بالأعيد بس تستوعب
I am really sorry to interrupt you. This is the worst part with facilitating workshops. That is when groups really talk a lot and really are into the discussion. You need to say that now you need to listen to me, which is not as fun as the rest. But now I would like for you to, if somebody at the table, I'm sure that you have written some bullet points, you have discussed about one or two really important words. So if you just could use the flip charts, those butcher paper flip charts, and just write one or two words, and either for the whole group or as you as an individual, doesn't matter. But please just put up one or two words on the flip chart, all of us, and we'll just use a couple of minutes to yes, please, to just put some words on the flip charts. Important things that you talked about. And please do it in English, okay? Which might be maybe a challenge, but please in English.
That's too big. I want to generalize the idea innovations.
شايف كانوا متحمسين مثلا عندهم تدرس مثلا لو
Okay. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much for this. You will have an opportunity to look at what everybody has written in a while, but not just now. But there is a lot of interesting things already, and all of you has put up some words is the same. So that is also very interesting. Now I just want you to very briefly, and those extra questions are just to help you exercise your mind. So if you just think about it, think about the individual youth, but also think about the collective youth. Is there, and just by yourself, just consider it. Is there something like all youth have in common? All youth in Saudi Arabia, all youth in Riyadh, all youth in your school, or even all youth around the world? Just think about it yourself. And if you think about it, what does it mean? If there is something like a collective youth, what would that mean? And if there are not, what would that mean? Just keep that thought in your head. So, next question to think about. You have already talked about all the things that youth stand for, or all the things that youth want. So just once again, by yourself, think about the question: how can we use the energy that youth has in discussions about the future? All of you have already proven to me, at least, that you are really interested in those kinds of questions. Just think about it yourself. How can we use that energy? What would you like to use that energy for? And just to start the discussion with your neighbor, and use those 3 bullet points just to help you along in that discussion. So start to talk about this with your neighbor, 2 by 2 or maybe 3 by 3, but not the whole group yet. Start talking to your neighbor about the questions. What do you think about this? Please join us.
معه مجموعة شوف المجموعة ناس المشكلة وين سافر بعضهم سافر
slide, please?
Yes, yes.
نكتب النقاط. like travel and
And when you discuss, and when you're having your discussions, just put down some notes on paper. A bullet point, one word, or if you have your flip chart really close, write them on the flip chart directly. But continue the discussion. And now start to think about what is your personal burning issue? What is you're passionate about? Just start to think about it. And at the same time, please use the flip chart, write down one word, one sentence, a bullet point from your discussions. But start slowly to think about what are you passionate about? What is your burning issue? Not necessarily problem or challenge. What do you really feel passionate about? It could be sports, but it could of course be a challenge or a problem. So if you want to solve the water crisis in the Middle East, that sorry.
Is this separate from the previous question?
Say again.
Is it separate from the previous question?
If you want it,
Okay. If I want to or not.
if you want it to be separate, it's separate. But if you want to build on the previous, that's perfect also.
First, you ask about as a group and as a single.
Yeah.
Can we use their energy?
Yes.
Okay. Or direct their energy.
Yes.
Now you think, what is your passion? You mean according to the youth?
Exactly.
So what I want from them?
Yes.
And the
Yes.
future.
Yes. And start to think about it as individual. So what is your personal passion? I don't know, but it could be something small, but it could be a huge challenge. The water crisis in the Middle East. But it could be something smaller. But just start to think about if somebody asked you the question, what is your passion? What would you answer?
My passion, or I want the youth to be.
No, your passion. Your,
And for me, it can be in innovation in any problem solving, but in the medical field.
that is your passion. Write it down.
My passion,
Yes.
not the youth.
No.
Okay.
Your passion.
أنا أوجد نفسي ما أنا من نفسي.
دايما يقول لك من حوارات من فترة شو في البيت ما حول ما صار حول لا مع الناس كثير سبحان الله هو الدين الجو لا وحتى نحاضر على الحد يعني حبينا شجعنا اسم الكريم
So now we have talked about what is the youth. We have talked a bit about your passion. And now I want us all to start to think about a bit about, let's call it, actions. What could we do with all the things that we have talked about so far? What is youth? What is your passion? What is most important? And now, let's go one step further and talk about, and this is, when I read the question now, it is not as good as when I wrote it back in Sweden. But what I mean is, what would the ideal situation look like for you to use your energy? For you to be able to talk about what you are passionate about? And I think that the three sub-questions maybe helps you a bit more than the first question. So what would you actually like to happen for those discussions, for your energy, for the passion, to actually be something that you could touch on? Some kind of action, or maybe even start to think about what I would call prototypes. What would you like to do? And now we have talked so much, so I think that you can start to talk 2 by 2, or maybe even the whole group together immediately.
Those people interacting.
It's perfect. Yes, yes. Much better than I suspected.
Yes, I liked that the speakers wanted to watch your workshop.
Yeah. It's really good.
Okay, just one question. Your visa, I have the email at my computer now, but your visa cost is how much? You remember the number?
250 euros.
You are sure with that number? Because I'm not sure. And also, in the bank and in the hotel, there's no exchange between riyals to euro or dollars. So is it okay to give it to you in riyal, and then you can exchange it at the airport?
Yes, of course. But the total sum because I had to travel both to Stockholm and Gothenburg.
Yes.
So the sum I mentioned to you was 500 euros, and
Yes,
that is everything.
Okay.
Yeah.
500 euro for all.
That's
Perfect.
and
So the visa is 250.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
okay, let me check. You have the tickets and to send me the. It's not the invoice. It's the ticket that you paid for, so I can give them to the accountant.
Yes,
Okay.
I can find them.
Perfect.
I can find them.
So 500 times 4.82, I think. It's 2,410 riyals.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. It's okay. If I,
Yeah. No problem. That's perfect.
Yeah. Anything else?
No, nothing. And I will because I need to check out tonight.
Yes.
Uh,
In a bit, I will.
Yeah,
prepare
but
this.
but what I pay for is drinks.
You paid for them?
No, but I will do that tonight.
Okay. You can put them on your room, I think.
Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
but I need to pay for them because.
I don't think you have to pay.
Okay, perfect. Then I'm
Tell
happy.
them it's on the room.
Okay.
And Asbár will pay for the room.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
لا احنا بالعكس احنا هون مشان تمكين لا مختلفة وعندي 15.
So, once again, I really hate to interrupt you, but now is another chance for you to write up a bullet point or a suggestion or an ID on the flip charts if you want to.
بحلم فيه واتمنى اطبقه فيه بس
So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, so we have done a bit of a journey. We started out with thinking about youth. We have talked a bit about collective youth, individual youth, talked about passion. We've talked about what are the big things that you think are important in the groups and you as individuals. And I always like to try to, I will definitely not try to summarize or wrap it up, but I would like you to, I would encourage you to think about, what is the next step. May I ask you a question? How many in here are students? Could you raise your hand? Students. Okay. So, yeah, I understand that. So, if you are a student, the first or the next step maybe is to talk to one of your teachers tomorrow or on Monday about those issues and see if there is something you can do at your school, in your class. Maybe. So just consider, just a few minutes, consider from this discussion, from what you have talked to your friends, what would be the next step? Small steps. You remember I said in the beginning, this is the first step. So small baby steps. Talk to your teacher, talk to another group of students. What would be the next step?
Det har jag också gjort. Första gången jag kör en workshop med hijab och burka. Mm. Jävligt annorlunda. Men det har varit ganska bra diskussioner. Även på sån här mini. Jag är förvånad. Jag hade ont i magen igår. Jag kan erkänna det nu. Jag hade ont i magen och jag tänkte, tänk om ingen säger någonting. Alla bara, zip. Det är grejs.
Yeah, to give the chance and implement the youth in the future as soon as possible. Now, as I told you, some of the youth are really, really, really creative and really open-minded, but they don't get the chance. The government does not give them the chance, neither the private sector, they don't do it, especially here in the region. Unlike for example, the United States, Britain,
Yeah.
Sweden.
I agree with you. Could you think of any idea how you could fix this? What would be your suggestion to?
Implement the youth. And I think the government must make like an open conference for the youth, and they bring their ideas, their inventions, for example. Then they discuss it with the investors. So not the investor, could be also, that's a private sector, another story, but I'm talking about the government. So the government, for example, we have an oil company, Aramco. It's still a government, okay, to the government. It belongs to the government.
Yeah.
They thought it would be to the private. Anyway, so for example, Aramco make an open conference for the youth to bring their ideas, their innovations, and they discuss it with the managers, the one who are responsible.
Senior managers.
Exactly.
Or even maybe, and that is a very specific situation
Yeah,
here,
it's
but
specific field in the company.
maybe you could even actually discuss things like this with the politicians,
Yeah, could be.
if there are politicians.
It could be.
Yeah.
And if the private sector also made like open conference, that would be really awesome. For example, Samnas, do you know the company?
Yeah.
If they made here in the Arabian region, Saudi Arabia, because it's the center of the region, an open conference, I bet there will be like minimum 500 young persons, people come to the conference. I bet on that.
Could you?
I will come.
Could you make that suggestion at your college?
I will. No problem.
That's very good.
I will.
And
But as I told you, here we have like a strict way of thinking, but I will try. Never give up.
that is true. And yeah, you will see my email at the end. So
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Stilen brakk jo.
Okay, my friends, I will really try to keep us in the time frame that we have.